Everything I do is for you. You're the only one that matters, even if you're not around. It's true, oh it's true. No one else compares to you. Everything I
One, two, two.
Hello everybody. Can all speakers who are going to speak today, can they come up to this stage area please? Everybody that knows that they're going to speak. We'll just about to begin. Well done everybody. Down with the BBC, down with the British state. Independence now.
I wonder if any of you have got something in common with me. I refuse to pay a television licence. Do you? Do you think the BBC will try and charge us 160 quid for watching that monstrosity? The voice piece, the mouthpiece, sorry, a propaganda and corruption of our imperial masters. Right, enough of me waffling. Right, first up, speaker for the day is Neil Hanvey. Alba.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, folks, listen, we are the ancient nation of Scotland. We were independent for centuries before the coerced incorporation of our country into the United Kingdom in 1707. We are Scotland. We are sovereign. And we remain sovereign. And today, and in the days to come, we will be united under one banner. And we must fight our cause under one banner as Scotland United. This is absolutely not any time for giving up. This is the time to push forward, to champion our cause like never before. Scotland's future must be in Scotland's hands. Not in the hands of the British state, not the Supreme Court, not Westminster, or any organ of the British state. The UK state apparatus told us this week that we were not hostages, that this was not a colony. Well, how can we be anything other than a colony when we have 50 representatives in a parliament of 650, where our voice is ignored day in, day out, and our people are cold and hungry? Over the last 9 months, £8 billion of Scottish revenue from oil and gas alone has flowed into the UK Treasury. Scotland's share of that is absolutely zero. 2.8 million homes are heated with the renewable bounty off the Fife coast. That is cabled directly to England. Scotland's share of that? Absolutely zero. This is completely unacceptable, folks. It has to change. Our people are cold and hungry. We have to pay the bills, and the UK Treasury keeps all the cash. Now we must mount a campaign of agitation, action like never before. We have to set aside all of our differences, however difficult that may be, because we have to unite. There are Tory supporters of independence. There are Lib Dem supporters of independence. There are Labour voters who are support independence. And there are Alba Party supporters of, obviously, of independence. All of those votes matter. All of that support counts. And there's a real problem because we have to decouple the challenges of the Scottish Government and the SNP from the independence movement. This is not about one party. This is not about one person. It's about every single one of us. And the way forward is not to wait till next year to have a chat. The way forward is to hold an independence convention of all the parties of Scotland who support independence and all the people of Scotland who support independence, MPs, MSPs, councillors and Civic Scotland. We need to decide how we're going to take this matter forward. We need to unite as united Scotland, speak with one voice. I'm going to finish expanding on an inspirational quote from Canyon Kenyon Wright, and that is, "They are the British state, and they, this week, said no. But we are the sovereign people of Scotland, and we say yes, yes, yes. Let me hear Scotland's lion roar." Thanks very much.
Thanks for that, Neil. Right. Most of you have heard of the Declaration of Sovereign Scot. For those of you who wish to add their signature and make their own individual declaration, have it recorded as part of an independent Scots history, Mike Fennick is standing there next to the grip bin, the lamp post. So if you want to make your way there and get your name on that, batter in. Our next speaker will be Jim Fairley from Sovereignty.
Good afternoon, fellow Scots. I would like, first of all, to thank All Under One Banner for inviting us to speak here today. It's an interesting situation that we now see. The theme of this rally is that Scotland is a nation and nobody has the right to tell us that we will not be a nation or that we will be governed by some alien power in Westminster. My old mate, Jim Sellers, a few weeks ago, talked about Scottish nationalists that he had known over the years. And Jim was brought up in the west coast of Scotland. His obvious loyalty was to the Labour Party. But he had known many nationalists over that period. And Jim liked to categorise us in different sections. And one of them was those who could go back to 1707. And he categorized us as big nationalists because we could go back to 1707. And in some ways he criticized those of us who have marched continuously in favor of independence for the Scottish people. And I pointed out to him that the one thing that keeps us marching is the fact that we do not have independence. and the fact that we will continue to march until that independence is achieved. Jim liked to categorize us, and during one of the meetings that we had, he said, those nationalists who can go back to 1707, I dub them as big nationalists because they go back to the Treaty of Union. And he criticized those of us who march as being looking too far in the past. We have gone too far beyond 1707. I have news for Jim. I can go back an awful lot further than 1707 because that is what makes us a nation. And we go back 1,000 years where Edward I and some others tried to take that nationhood away from us. They never succeeded. Jim talked about going back to 1707. I can go back an awful lot further than that. Largs, as a battle was fought in October 1263, and it stopped 500 years of Vikings trying to take control of the west coast of Scotland. Stirling Bridge was fought on September the 11th, 1297. And that's where Wallace started the fight back that has continued to this day. Malcolm Canmore was crowned at Scone in 1058 and died in 1093. Those are the dates that stick in my mind, because that, ladies and gentlemen, is our history as a people. It's what makes us what we are, Scots. And we are not prepared to be anything other than Scots, and we are not prepared to lie down to any judgment from any Westminster court. The Supreme Court decision, which brings us here today, was always going to be what it was. Nobody ever put any faith in the Supreme Court deciding that we as an independent nation state could survive without the British telling us what to do. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are telling them exactly the opposite. We will be the Scottish people. We will be independent. It has to come yet, and we keep campaigning until it does. The Scottish Government has said that Section 30 may be a problem. Only if we recognize it. We can tell them to stuff their Section 30. There is no way that I am marching to allow England's court to determine whether or not I am going to be an independent Scot. When the leaders of the SNP in 2014 signed the Section 30, they were signing away the sovereignty of the Scottish people. And I asked them now, as I have asked them repeatedly, who gave them the right to sign away our sovereignty? Sovereignty lies with the Scottish people. It does not lie with individuals within the Scottish Government. I appreciate the opportunity that All Under One Banner has given us And I represent a party called Sovereignty. It was started not by me, but by others who believed that there was a missing link in the political firmament in Scotland, and that that link should be a party which stood up for the sovereignty of the Scottish people. And here I'm going to be a wee bit controversial. Sovereignty of the Scottish people away from Westminster and away from the European Union. I am not marching to be part of the European Union. I am marching to be a Scot determined to be independent. And that being part of the European Union does not allow you to do that. If we are all under one banner, we have to learn to be honest with each other. If I am not prepared to march to allow Westminster to determine whether or not I can be independent, I sure as hell am not going to march to allow the European Union to say the same thing. And although we are all marching under one banner, we have to learn to be honest with each other and be prepared to say to anybody who wants to question the right of the Scottish people, not only to be independent, but to be sovereign. It's not the same thing. And I would ask you to give some thought to what is being offered by some of the other political parties. I will finish by again thanking All Under One Banner for giving us the opportunity to speak here today. I hope it won't be the last time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Jim. Next up, everybody's favourite blogger, freelance writer, Mr. Peter Bell.
Yeah. Right. Oh, hello. I'm not quite sure why I'm here, quite honestly. Usually for events like this, they want speakers who'll tell the crowd what they want to hear, and that's certainly not me. I tell it the way I see it, good or bad. And right now, I have to tell you, there's more bad than good. They usually want people up here who'll tell you things like, we've never been closer to independence, which may well be the most stupid thing ever said by a politician, which is remarkable, given that it was up against competition from the likes of Douglas Ross. They want people who'll tell you the UK is on the verge of collapse, despite the fact that there is no evidence whatever for that. They want people who'll go on about how the British government's position is unsustainable, despite the fact that the British government has sustained that position without apparent effort for a very long time and continues to do so. Somebody needs to tell them it's unsustainable. Everything that supposedly weakens our opponents, when looked at through the eyes of a realist, actually seems to have made them more entrenched in that supposedly unsustainable position. Be honest, have you seen the slightest indication that the British government's opposition to Scotland's cause might be weakening? Have you? Or, like me, have you only seen them grow more determined to cling to their northern annexed territory the longer we continue to fight to restore Scotland's independence? Don't be fooled. We are not closer to independence than we have ever been. The reality is that we're no closer now than we were 10 years ago. We could even be said to have gone backwards. The UK Supreme Court judgment on Wednesday is held up as being yet another blow to the Union. Once again, the British government's position is declared unsustainable, while the British government continues to sustain its position. There has been a lot of anger directed at the judges. I don't know why. All they did was state the truth about Scotland's status under the heel of the Union. Think about it. Essentially, what the judges said is that we cannot have an independence referendum without the consent of the British state. Nicola Sturgeon has been telling us the same thing for years. She calls it the gold standard of democracy. But when these judges say it, all of a sudden, it's an insult to democracy. It is an insult to democracy. It has always been an insult to democracy. It's an insult to democracy when the UK Supreme Court judges state it as their answer to a question put on behalf of the Scottish Government. It is an insult to democracy when Nicola Sturgeon presents it as the gold standard. Put a question to a British court and you're going to get a British answer. Why should we be shocked and angry at what the judges said when all they've said is what a British court was bound to say? Referring the draft referendum bill to the UK Supreme Court has been portrayed as a deft bit of politicking on the part of Nicola Sturgeon. But does that claim stand up to scrutiny? The truth is that referring the draft referendum bill was an act of clumsy political ineptitude done for no purpose other than to look like something was being done. It was an act of political folly such as a government can only get away with when it is not subject to proper scrutiny. Much better would have been to have that court case, the referral done by the British state after the referendum bill had been through the Scottish Parliament. Before the referral, the Scottish Government had the ability to put a referendum bill through the Scottish Parliament. Now we don't. That's been squandered. It's gone. And it was not an isolated mistake. The truth is that while Nicola Sturgeon has been highly competent as a First Minister, as the leader of the independence movement, she has been an abject failure. I know there are a great many people who don't want to hear this. They refuse to accept any criticism of Nicola Sturgeon's leadership. They will not tolerate any scrutiny. Well, these people need to wake up. Whether they like it or not, they need to hear the truth. We need Nicola Sturgeon. We need the SNP. She is the First Minister. The SNP is the party of government. We absolutely need them because only they can act to save Scotland from a British nationalist onslaught that is about to get massively more ferocious. We need them, but we need them to do better. We need them to do more. We need them to do different. Nicola Sturgeon's whole approach to the constitutional situation has been a failure. It continues to fail. We cannot afford to fail. Everything that we think of as Scotland is at stake. All our aspirations for the future are on the line. We must do better. We must rethink every aspect of our cause and our campaign, and we must do so now. Hasn't that reference to the Supreme Court given the Unionists exactly what they want? They now have a Supreme Court judgment to use as a weapon against us. If you think it was a really clever move, consider this one point, the point that I just made prior to asking the question, the Scottish Government had that power to put a referendum bill through the Scottish Parliament, and now it doesn't. I thought I'd forgotten that bit earlier on, so I chucked it in. We could have had that referendum bill through to royal assent. Now it can't. That possibility has been squandered. And it would have been so much better, because think, if the British government had been challenging the bill in the UK Supreme Court, think of the argument that they would have had to put. They would have had to argue that we are not sovereign. They would have had to argue that we are not a nation. They would have had to argue that we do not have the right of self-determination. They would have had to argue the ridiculous argument that Westminster has more democratic legitimacy than Holyrood. They wouldn't want to make those arguments. They could have been forced to make those arguments. Now they won't be. Why? What did we get in return? We got told something we already knew, that the Union is inherently anti-democratic. The judge's judgment was unjust because the Union is unjust. We were told that it's inevitable that a referendum bill would end up being referred to the UK Supreme Court, and that it was better to get it done and dusted. Does that claim stand up to scrutiny? Think about it. The way it was presented, the referendum bill being referred now by the Scottish Government or later by the British Government, were treated as if it was 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. We were told that the British Government was being wrong-footed by this clever ploy. Does it look to you as if the British Government stumbled? Did they appear unduly troubled by this cunning tactic? Forget what the headlines in the National say. Just think about the way the British Government reacted. The reality is that they were completely untroubled by the referral. The reality is that it was a win-win-win situation for the British Government. There was no judgment the court could have made which caused the British Government any difficulties. Even if the proposed referendum had gone ahead, it was written into the legislation that it would have no effect. So why would the British Government be bothered? Nicola Sturgeon has taken the wrong approach to the whole constitutional issue. She must be made to rethink that. And we are the only ones who can do that. So let's do it.
Thanks for that, Peter. Good thing about being all under one banner is we can all have our differences and we can disagree with each other. But the thing is, we stay together, the job's done. Okay. Next up, we have Leah Gunn Barrett from Salvo.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Wednesday's English Supreme Court decision denying the Scottish people the right to choose their own future is illegal. That's because Scotland's long hidden constitution is still in effect in international law. The SNP leadership should never have asked an English court for permission for something that we'd always had the power to do for ourselves. The 1689 claim of right upholds the principle of the Scottish people's sovereignty over any government or parliament. It was put into the 1707 treaty by the Scottish negotiators as a precondition to the treaty and was ratified by 2 parliaments to guarantee that the Scottish Constitution would remain in force after the UK was created. In September, Charles III swore allegiance to the claim of right, and the Westminster Parliament has affirmed it in 1989, 2012, and 2018. By contrast, England's unwritten constitution is the polar opposite of popular sovereignty. It's based on Parliament's sovereignty over the people. But Westminster cannot be sovereign in Scotland. That's because the people are and always have been. Did you know the claim of right gives the Scottish people to sack a government that fails to uphold their rights and interests? Wouldn't that be nice if we could do that? The Convention of the Estates, a tribunal of Scottish citizens, had the power to depose a corrupt government and replace it with one that served the common good and upheld the people's sovereignty. The claim of right is a clear contract between the people and their government, and it is the only codified constitution in the whole of the UK. The claim of right also upholds Scotland's territorial and judicial sovereignty. Did you ever wonder why Mary was Queen of Scots and not Queen of Scotland? Scotland never had a king or queen of the land, only of the people. An English monarch never had the power to merge the lands of England and Scotland into a single territorial nation. Nor did the Scottish Parliament, because it never possessed that power. The Scottish people do. They have that power, and we still have it. The British state has usurped the people's power and exercised territorial sovereignty over Scotland when it has had no legal right to do so. It has replaced Scotland's ancient constitution with England's constitution in flagrant breach of the treaty conditions, so that hardly today anyone questions it. For centuries, England has seized and disposed of Scotland's territorial assets with no compensation to the rightful owners, the people of Scotland. The ownership of the territory of Scotland, which is known as the realm, is vested in the crown, but the crown in Scotland is not a monarch or a government. Guess what? The crown is the people. The political union between England and Scotland has never been a territorial union. The UK government has stolen the natural resources belonging to the Scottish people. It has knowingly committed fraud against a sovereign territorial nation. That's a crime in international law. It's why Scots are poor and will freeze and die this winter, an outrage when our nation is energy rich. The claim of right upholds Scotland's judicial sovereignty, yet Scotland's highest court, the Court of Session, has been replaced by an English court that claimed on Wednesday that Scotland was voluntarily annexed. This is fraud, too, in international law, and it cannot be legitimized by the highest domestic court of the fraudster nation. The English Supreme Court ruling made it clear that Scotland is not in a voluntary union, but a de facto colony of England. Our colonial status explains the ongoing plundering of our resources, the absurdity of an energy-rich nation with fuel-poor citizens, the feudal system of land ownership, where just 432 families own half the rural land, the loss of 4 million Scots who were killed, driven from their land, or deported to overseas English colonies. It explains the vast wealth inequalities and persistent poverty. It explains decades of Westminster governments we did not vote for. It explains our forced ejection from the European Union. And it explains why Scots don't know their own language, history, and constitution, because the colonial power has suppressed them. And it explains why an English court thinks it can tell Scotland what it can and can't do. The nation of Scotland was not extinguished with the Union. The UK tells the world Scotland is in a voluntary political union, but it tells Scotland it's in a colonial prison. Political parties are not going to liberate us. Forget the Tories and forget Labour. It has moved so far to the right that this week the Spectator magazine gave Sir Keir its Politician of the Year award for his fealty to Tory depravity. The SNP elite is too cozy in its Westminster cocoon. Its aim is to delay and prevent independence, and it's subservient to Westminster, not Scottish law. Not surprising, because don't forget, devolution is a creature of the Union. Holyrood is Westminster's administrative arm in Scotland. Only we, the people, can restore our sovereignty and statehood. We've always had the keys to escape this union. To do so, we must unite, create a popular liberation movement of the people, and revive a modern convention of the estates. Please go to liberation.scot to join the People's Liberation Movement, because when we're united, the British state and its political minions will be utterly powerless to stop us. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Leah. Mike Fennick, he's feeling a bit lonely standing there. So if you'd like to go and sign the Declaration of Sovereign Scot, go now and give him a cuddle. Come on, make his day. Right. Next speaker up is from my hometown. Speaking for Falkirk Forum Independence, local councillor Brian McCabe.
Good afternoon, Glasgow. Good afternoon, Scotland. I think the last time I saw a crowd as maybe damp and cold as this was at the Glasgow Derby, Clyde versus Partick Thistle at Shawfield. I was there, I was frozen. Well done to you all today for coming out to show your support for the case for independence. I'd hazard a guess it's not only support, but also a level of frustration at the malaise which may have gripped our cause, but it's most certainly the frustration at the contempt shown by the British establishment to Scottish independence. Now let me state at the outset, I do not disagree with the Supreme Court's decision. It's what they do. They apply the law. As you know, the law can be an ass. Having heard the decision, I don't know if there are too many here who were stunned or shocked or surprised. I certainly wasn't. We knew that UK is as UK does. In other words, it would protect itself, the UK, from the very expensive, very costly, and very detrimental departure of a sovereign state, Scotland. Scotland is no basket case. Scotland is no drain on the UK. Scotland is a net positive to the Union. We contribute far more than we receive back in block grants or Barnett consequentials or growth deal levelling up bungs for sweeties. Scotland can stand alone. In Europe and with Europe, not standing at the outside looking in. Since Brexit, a decision totally at odds with the vast majority of Cootie Scots, we've had to endure falling living standards, increasing taxes, deteriorating services, astronomical energy charges, and criminal political malfeasance. It's our time to say no more. It's time for change. It's time for independence. It's our time. Our future lies with no one other than ourselves. It's up to each and every one of us here to bring our best game to the table, to question. Question no one more so than our elected officials, councillors, myself. When will we have independence? Not a referendum. Independence. How will we gain that independence? Where are we taking the argument? What are we doing to push the case? Why aren't we there yet? Question. There is no better time to ask what you can do to help your country, Scotland. You are the driving force for our cause, you and me. We have to support and cajole, agree and debate, shout and listen. Write to your MPs and MSPs, ask them for answers. Don't be fobbed off, don't be ignored. Attend rallies like this, bring along your friends, lots of friends. We need to grow our support. It's all about inclusion. Whether you agree on prescriptions or the pound, nuclear or our health, we can all agree that we must be able to do better than this. Current conditions have presented us with all of the issues we would possibly need to highlight the dire consequences for our immediate future. Things are bad, hellish in fact, but they are not of our choosing. They could be improved immensely if we had the power of self-determination. Momentum is with us. It only needs encouragement, and that encouragement comes from you, It won't be politicians or civil servants, judges or political parties. They only respond to pressure. And what better pressure than the loud voices of a sovereign nation? Shout it loud. Scotland will be free. And listen, I'll be shouting too. Thank you very much. And thanks to All on One Banner for the invite today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, just a couple of points before our next speaker. Just so you know, we always invite all pro-independence parties. We issue invitations to the SNP, to the Scottish Greens to speak at every event that we do, and all the other parties. So the ISP, you name it. And the ones that we get on the day are the ones that are available. So if you see any gaps and you're thinking there's no SNP, there's no Scottish Greens, it's not because they weren't invited. They're always invited. Because this is all under one banner. It's the Yes movement. We're all in it. If you support independence, you're in the Yes movement. Full stop. Now, one other point is that we've got thousands of these flyers. One side is the next march at Glasgow next year, which just so happens to be on the coronation of King Charles III the same day. So we're looking for a huge attendance going through the streets of Glasgow. We're going to welcome His Royal Highness. And on the back of it is the dates for next year. So we've got thousands of these. Please take some away with you and distribute them as you see fit. So we've got a few more speakers, and the pipers are going to play a tune for us. Next up, to introduce Bob Fotheringham of the Socialist Workers' Party. Big round of applause, please.
Hi there, folks. I want to start off by slightly disagreeing with the usefulness of what has taken place with the Supreme Court. I mean, I know the decision in a lot of ways was a foregone conclusion. I think that's absolutely clear. But I think Lord Reid made a statement, I think, which is quite important. Because what he said was that an independence referendum, even if it's advisory, and people vote yes, throws into question the whole nature of the British state and the sovereignty of the British state over Scotland. Now, what that's telling you is not that they fear politicians, not that they fear ordinary politicians. What they fear is democracy themselves and the power of ordinary people. That's what they actually fear. And I think that's quite an important point to recognise. It's democracy itself that they actually fear. I've also got to say that the courts in Britain are not just an instrument of the British state, they're an instrument of class politics as well. They're there to uphold the British state and the political and economic system behind them. So I think appealing to sovereignty is not going to change things in any way whatsoever. It's only going to be the power, organised power of ordinary working people to change and confront society that's going to bring about radical change. And there needs to be a sea change in the independence movement. People need to get back out, get organised, get on the streets, talk about how we can actually confront the British state in a serious manner, in a serious way. The Catalans, if you think back on it, only had an independence referendum. I know that the Spanish state eventually went in and smashed that, but the Catalans only organised an illegal referendum because the rank and file, the grassroots of the Catalan independence movement went out and built a series of referendums, local referendums that built up and put pressure on the politicians to eventually have a national referendum in Catalonia. Now that was an example of grassroots power. Now it may or may not be applicable to Scotland, but it's the sort of initiative we need. People need to take things into their own hands. Another thing a point I want to make, myself, I've been an active socialist and involved in the trade union movement all of my adult life. And I've got to say to anyone who's a socialist and a member of the trade union, and I mean the Labour Party as well, not Keir Starmer, but ordinary Labour Party members. The gauntlet has been thrown down here on the basic level of democracy in Scotland. And if the trade union and socialist movement and the working class movement is about anything, it's about basic democracy by ordinary working people. And therefore, this is a fight that they should be involved in. At the very minimum, the trade union movement in Scotland should demand the right of Scotland to have a second independence referendum. That's an absolute basic right, even if they don't agree with independence. Some of them will not agree with independence. But they should allow the right of the Scottish people to have a vote, of ordinary Scottish people to have a vote. So that's my message to people in the kind of working class movement in Scotland. I've also got to say a little bit about the SNP. I mean, people have talked quite rightly about the dead end of going to the Supreme Court. But there's other areas, I think, in which the SNP have got to step up. For a start, they should be paying the teachers a decent wage rise. They should be paying the nurses a decent wage rise. They should be paying the railway workers a decent wage rise. The Scottish Government has got taxation powers. Bring in a progressive taxation regime that allows them to tax the rich so we can pay ordinary working people. That's the route that we should be going down in Scotland. I mean, the other aspect of it is I don't accept this argument that you often hear in the independence movement. First, we've got to talk about independence. Then we've got to think about what Scotland's going to be like afterwards. Sorry, unless ordinary people in Scotland have a vision, working people in Scotland who actually largely support independence, used to vote Labour, now they support independence and vote SNP, have a vision of a better country, a better future, they will not support independence. We have to tax the oil companies and the energy companies. We have to pay ordinary people a decent wage. Why are the SNP giving millions to a war in Ukraine and not investing it in Scotland? Why are they doing that? So, we need to build links with the trade union and working class movement. Most of all because they have the potential power to challenge the British state. We need a picture of Scotland which is radical, which is different, which supports ordinary people, which invests in the NHS, which welcomes refugees and immigrants, that tackles climate change in a serious manner. We need a future in Scotland that goes beyond simply the argument about sovereignty. We need something that's real and different, and that means the grassroots need to get organised and go out and fight for it. Thanks very much, folks.
That's brilliant, Bob. Thank you. Okay, next to speak, we have 3 more speakers, and then the pipers are going to play a couple of tunes for us to finish off the rally, and then Ross, DJ Freedom, is going to see us out with some tunes. So next up, we've got Ian Grant of the Scottish Independence Foundation. Big clap, please.
Hi, folks. 2 days since that, or 3 days, is it, since the disastrous decision by the judges down south. It is absolutely ludicrous that the future of Scotland has been decided by, or it's not been decided, they think it's been decided by an illegal English court. If you read the Treaty of Union, Article 19, this court was illegal. It's also ludicrous that a Scottish government asked this court to adjudicate in this matter. It's almost analogous to the Scottish nobles asking Edward I to select a new king for them. It is absolutely mad. At least, and this was my first thought, the court was clear, they blocked a lawful referendum and finally confirmed what was basically a consensual union, or so they said, of the United Kingdom. They've turned it into a forcible union from which Scotland has no clear route of escape. Frankly, given the pathetic case made by the Lord Advocate, actually the judges had little choice. But my second thought was related to the matter of the SNP evidence to the court on the inalienable right of the Scottish people to self-determination. The court arrogantly showed total contempt for Scotland. They said they were, quote, unable to accept the SNP's argument that our country's right to self-determination was based on international law. In the court's opinion, this right only exists in situations of, quote, former colonies or where a people is oppressed or denied meaningful access to government. Well, we are certainly have been, well, tell that basically to the Highlanders who were burnt out of their crofts in the 18th and 19th century, those who were forcibly deported under Empire Settlement Acts. What about Thomas Muir, deported to Australia, the radicals executed in 1820? Tell all of us who get Tory governments we don't vote for. And what about the 50 years of oil revenues that have gone down south? Total disgrace. Basically, they're saying we in Scotland are not sufficiently oppressed or pillaged enough as a to merit self-determination. This is, on the experience of the last 300 years, that is rubbish. Personally, I've zero respect for the verdict of the court. This court should never be sitting under the Treaty of Union. It should have no jurisdiction in our land. And I'm actually appalled at the First Minister respecting the judgment and saying she was disappointed. I'm furious. So where to go now? The SNP says a plebiscite election, de facto referendum, hasn't worked it out, doesn't know whether it's Westminster or Holyrood. We don't know what we do if we win it. We just don't know. She says we're going to have a special SNP conference on how to go forward, but we need something much wider. We need the whole movement. We need a constitutional convention encompassing all the parties, the Yes Movement, Civic Scotland. This was promised in 2020, I think. No, and it's certainly not been delivered, and we need it now. If the SNP will not establish this convention, I think the movement has to convene it. In the last 8 years, since 2014, we have progressed not one whit to our goal of independence. This court judgment must now energise us further to channel our anger and frustration to a positive campaign. And that does mean homework as well as actually getting on the streets. It means we've got to plan the campaign focused on democracy for Scotland, the clear case for independence, a plan to achieve it, and a clear positive vision and narrative for our journey to independence and beyond. And certainly, what was said previously, beyond independence is why we're getting independence. So, where are we now? My first reaction 3 days ago was satisfaction. We got an unequivocal no. We know where we were. My second was fury at it being treated with such disrespect. My third is determination to channel that anger into a positive campaign. And one of the things, I represent the Scottish Independence Foundation. We raise money for independence causes. We give money to marches. We give money to meetings. We give money to books about independence, including my own wee book. And we will continue to do that. So if you fancy contributing, sif.scot. And if you want to apply for money, you also go to sif.scot. So I think that's all I've got to say. Thanks very much for listening.
Okay, thanks. Next up, we've got Sam Cook from Yes Greater Glasgow.
Hello, fellow political prisoners of this involuntary union. On Wednesday, we get the result we did not want, but it was the result we expected. Now, I'm going to say something that will shock a few people. It's not the result Westminster wanted. The Supreme Court could have ruled that they could not legislate on the bill in front of them. They could have abstained, to put it that way. That is truly the result Westminster wanted. The result we have gained has empowered our movement, It's taught us what we already know, that we are subservient to them. Now is the time for us to truly break the shackles that we knew always existed. We know as a movement we need to unite, because it looks like the outcome might be a plebiscite, a referendum, a plebiscite election. Now, since 2016, many of us have tried to do that and failed by using the list system to our advantage. Then we seen the come about of ISP and AFI trying to unite the movement on the list. AFI then disbanded because we thankfully seen a bigger vehicle coming with someone who led us in 2014 come back, and that was Alba and Alex Salmond. Now, I'm not asking you to join these parties. I'm not asking you to support these parties. All I'm saying is when it comes to independence, we need to work together. There is more that unites us than divides us, and the people united will never be defeated. Now the fight back has started. We may or may not have a referendum on the 19th of October 2023. Personally, I would like to see us at the ballot box, just like the Catalans. It's time that we stop asking for permission. This is about us. This is about our future, our grandkids, kids, the future generations behind us. We stand and govern where Margot MacDonald helped to start that journey, becoming one of the first SNP MPs, and what a barrel load of work she created. What a barrel load in the legacy she left behind. We need to carry that baton. We need to keep it going. It's time that we go out and educate. It's time we go out and agitate. And it's time that we organise. Because that's only truly how we'll bring down the British establishment. We have seen it for decades and decades. Scotland has suffered setbacks. This is only one of them. It's time to keep going. It's time to strike while the iron is hot. We must keep this going. Stay united, stay for independence, and let's get there.
Thank you, Sam. That was brilliant. I get two more speakers for you. Thanks for everybody staying and listening to them. Next up, we've got James Scott, the Scottish Resistance.
Good afternoon, folks. Now, everybody's mentioned it. That ruling by an English court. Why the hell the SNP decided to allow an English court to decide? I really don't understand. One thing they didn't take away from us in 1707 was Scottish law. Scottish law should have stepped in and says, no, English court's not making a decision on it. It's up to us. Now, let me tell you something about this. See this attitude that Scots have got, that's been indoctrinated into us for hundreds of years now, that we have got to have their permission. It's not true. See, in 1314, when Robert the Bruce won the Battle of Bannockburn, people still said, but we weren't free, because England didn't say we were free until the Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton in 1328 and 1329. We don't need their permission. When Robert the Bruce won the Battle of Bannockburn, the high English taxes stopped immediately. We were a free country. And talking about taxes, this is the reason that all the other countries left this bloody Westminster regime. In America, because the taxes were so high, they dumped the bloody tea in Boston Harbour and told the Britons to get stuffed. In India, Gandhi had protests not just once at the weekend, every bloody day of the week. We have got to protest every day of the week. When Gandhi and the Indian people stood up against the Brits, they got rid of them. And you know what happened? After 200 years of rule of the Brits in India, there were no more famines because the people weren't taxed to the bloody hill. That's what caused all the death and famine in India, because of their bloody high taxes. There has never been a more evil, murdering regime than Westminster. And all you get for this lot is smiling bloody newsreaders. They are a shower of complete bastards. We have got to get rid of them out of Scotland. It's time for resistance. This is the Scottish resistance. We will never give up the fight for Scotland's freedom. Never!
Well done. Right, our final speaker is George Brown, an independence activist. Just to say, there's still a lot of flyers here. There's been people coming up and getting piles. You don't need to take loads, or you can take quite a few. Please come up and take some away with you. Final speaker, George Brown, and then the Pipers. Thank you.
How do you follow that? That was fantastic. Just to say, that building over there is a factory. It's a factory that manufactures lies, myth-truths, and evil on Scotland. Now, don't blame the people inside it. There's an awful lot of good people in there. And they've been warned, if they go near the windows, they'll be sacked. I was at other demonstrations here, and people come up to the window, and I tell you, they were quick enough to drag them away. Can I say a word about the police here? The number of police is directly equivalent to the threat to the union that we are. When I was coming in here, the number of police vans hidden up the back shows that the British state are worried, right? They're worried about us. But listen, please don't condemn the ordinary police. They've been cheated out of their pension. Most of them are now going to work till they're 67. Now, can you imagine chasing somebody at 67? Are you listening over there? Wave if you're listening. Not allowed to wave. Can I say, I'm not here to slag Nicola Sturgeon, right? But whoever gave her the advice to go and seek permission from Westminster for our independence, it's some kind of joke. They should be sacked and never employed again. Can you imagine if India had to ask permission to leave the British Empire? It's ridiculous. You don't ask the jailer to be free. It's absolutely madness. Now, if any of you out here are still paying the TV license, stop immediately. It is not a criminal offence. It's a civil matter. You do not let anyone into your house except, you listening? Except the fire service, right? The gas board and the electricity board. The police are not allowed in. If they come in without a sufficient warrant, that police officer is in big trouble. So do not let MD into your house unless you want to. So forget your TV license, and that's 320 quid towards your heating bill. Just to let you know about heating, by the way, I spoke to a guy from Scottish Power. When they put the wind turbine up, the cost of producing energy, including all the maintenance, right? All the maintenance is 4.7 pence a kilowatt. And he told me, every time we put a new turbine up that's taller, the cost to generate electricity is even cheaper, right? So we're being ripped off big style. Now, some of the speakers here have kind of poured cold water that we'll never get a referendum, we'll never get independence. We do not have a mountain to climb. The British state, although it appears strong and firm, they're like jelly. When you push them over, they'll bend. They will bend. A long time ago, a wee island called Malta, right, wanted its independence. And there was a big kerfuffle, and they said, whoa, they'll be
begging to come back in 6 weeks. They'll be bankrupt. Well, within a month, their economy grew and they never looked back. And that'll be the same for Scotland. When we are free, we will never look back. So, do not despair. All the political parties are selling something, but what they can't sell is your confidence. So do not give up. Do not despair. The darkest hour, as someone once said, is before dawn. And I think a few other politicians have said, events, dear boy, events. And events is going to happen. So trust no one except yourself. Believe in yourself and believe in Scotland. And we will be free. Okay? Oh, one more thing, right? When you see a Union Jack anywhere, tear it down. Don't ask for permission. Okay?
Okay, thanks everyone. We'll get the pipers now. If you say we've got JRU and Chris Davidson coming up.